right. Another episode of the Side Note podcast, a podcast dedicated to electronic music, underground electronic music, and all things related. Very special guest today. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you guys Claus, a rising up-and-comer in the techno scene here in LA and Southern California. So welcome.
Thanks, guys. Really happy to be here. I'm excited to chat with you more.
Yeah, so good to have you, and actually so good to have the first woman guest in my 6-episode run. I was telling them before we started shooting that it's been, pretty challenging to get people to come on, even like doubly so when you're talking to female DJs, because it's like, hey, do you want to come over to my place and shoot a podcast, which like does not like really sound on the up and up. So thank you for being here.
Definitely. It's even playing at shows and stuff, it's definitely less common. There's not many of us yet.
Yeah. So actually, tell me about that. Like, I like to ask kind of guests, what was your weekend like, or if you played a show this weekend, or you're the last show that you played, kind of, where and when was that?
Yeah. So the last show I played was at a warehouse downtown. It was called Succubus, and it was more of a gothic scene. Really cool. There's actually 2 women on that lineup, me and another girl from a collective that I play at called Fallen Angel. The girl was Nectar. She's also a badass. So it definitely helps being a woman in DJing. We have kind of like a girl crew that we play together. So like coming up together,
right,
encouraging each other.
Yeah, so like as an older raver myself, I'm definitely used to coming up in a time where like the lineups were just like all dudes, and then you might have like a Sandra Collins or like a DJ Heather or something kind of in the mix, but it was definitely few and far between. And then, I think these days it's certainly getting better, right? I mean, the number one DJ in the world right now is Charlotte DeWitt, at least on the alternative. Yeah. Oh.
I got her shirt on, yeah.
I have a CDW shirt too. I should have worn it. It's the one that says "You're tripping, mate" on the back in like really fuzzy letters. So I mean, clearly the landscape is changing. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like for you it's just kind of a neutral situation, like your being a woman doesn't even factor into it at all, or do you feel like it hurts or it helps? Like kind of what's your take?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's an advantage because there aren't a lot of women, and like people are really, really excited to see a woman up there, especially being like 5'3", not very scary or intimidating. And I come out and play this like crazy aggressive music. So it's definitely a positive, I think. And it's cool to see. I mean, I saw somebody's post and it was like, it took all the guy DJs off the lineup and it showed girls, and it was like 25-30%.
Wow.
Where like the lineup was like empty. But there are more girls coming about. Especially, I mean, a lot of my music influence comes from Europe. Techno is huge there. And their scene has a lot more. So it's cool to see some of their artists, like some of them are coming over here. And especially one of my biggest influences is Charlotte, for sure. She is definitely an acid queen. So I think with her influence, Amelie, that has encouraged a lot of more women to come out and start playing and given them confidence to really be doing this.
Yeah, I mean, across techno and other genres, I feel like the 2020s have really been kind of focused on like really amazing female DJs like Peggy Goo, Amelie Lenz. I mean, even before that, I've always been a fan of like Maya Jane Coles and all of her various side projects. So it's really cool to see it. It's really cool to see that it's not only is it not just a like boys club anymore, it's not just like a white boys club or like a white women's club. I feel like it's, because rave was always built on plur, right? And then, it started in like gay parties and kind of grew from there. And I feel like as it's become mainstream, like Hollywood kind of got in there and like kind of corrupted it to its own thing, to where like, every EDM show is like a 19-year-old, like little kid, like Zed or something. And no hate on Zed, but right, it's like very kind of like, this is what we're putting out now. And I appreciate that sort of, seeing your work and, people like you. I definitely feel like, as all inclusive as we've tried to be, you know, we're actually starting to more actually like closely resemble like the principles that we put forth.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know too if it was that like why there isn't necessarily so like more women on the lineup. Not that we like people were like you can't play or anything, but it just maybe was already so dominated that for a woman to shine, it was like so much harder to be noticed because of all the other people on the lineup already doing this thing, and they're like, well, who's this person?
Right.
So maybe it makes it a little bit harder, I think. But when they do shine, it's like, oh my God, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot like comedy where I feel like initially people were like, oh, women can't be funny or whatever. Like you hear that when female comedians talk about their journeys and now like that argument is just completely out the door, right? Like there's so many really, you know, and it was paved the way by people like Ellen, but even now there's just tons. Like there's like a comedian, and I know this isn't a comedian podcast, but just shout out to, you know, like some trailblazers there, like Annie Letterman or like Nikki Glazer or like Whitney Cummings or something. So I feel like those are like your equivalents, like on the comedy world.
Yeah.
But on the DJ side. So, you know, I wanted to ask, I was actually looking at that. I think I saw like a clip that you had posted on about that Succubus party, and something that really stuck out to me again, like as a raver who's been doing it for a while, is how goth like the scene has gotten. Where I was like, wait, this is like total goth, but they're slamming techno music. So I don't know, like if you know anything about how that came to pass, because it's definitely a different vibe from, you know, Candy Kids with visors and Tickle Me Elmo backpacks to this new thing.
Yeah, it's definitely like complete opposite. I would say, I mean, there's always been BDSM culture. That's kind of what that show was. That goes along with the goth. I mean, originally goth was like new wave, like Boy Harsher, stuff like that. There's also that industrial touch to it where there is an industrial side of techno. But I think the main place where it comes from is Europe. Like I actually traveled in Berlin for about a week, and like all through Eastern Europe, and all their clubs there are like BDSM gay sex clubs, and it's almost part of like the techno culture. Like everybody always wears all black. Some of the clubs too, they're like even you have to dress in like leather or some kind of harness or something like that to get into their clubs because they're kind of tough, and they want it to be they want the whole environment to be what they imagine it to be. So that was the vibe that I got in Berlin, that it was like it's very gothic, honestly.
Did you guys go to the Berghain or?
We didn't get to go to Berghain.
Okay.
We did go to a 24-hour music festival there.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I have to imagine it was probably like comparable to whatever you might experience at Berghain, but.
It was pretty cool. Honestly, like it was my favorite festival by far. I mean, 24 hours, each DJ got 2 hours. There was like a big main stage. It was in this place called Funkhaus, which is this giant utility warehouse. It had 2 stages, and like every techno god you wanted to see. Richie played at midnight, Ricardo Villalobos, Charlotte, Anna, Josh Wink.
The royalty, yeah.
Yeah, the royalty. You were just like, I mean, I couldn't believe that we were there.
Wow.
So.
Then I guess, I mean, that might be a good segue in terms of like, how did you get into techno to begin with, or rave, or I mean, any number of terms for it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ever since I was little, I played piano. I was always into music. My family is very musical. My uncle is a classical pianist in Taiwan, studied piano in college. My dad always played guitar growing up. All of my siblings and me took piano lessons. And then my mom started taking me to live shows when I was younger. So it kind of was just, I think it was bound to happen when I moved to college in Arizona. Okay. I got super into the bass scene there because I think that's their biggest scene. And I think it just slowly picked up the tempo. Like I hit a bunch of genres. I mean, I was in a house for a while, and I think I didn't really know techno, but I was listening to it. I just didn't know what it was. And then actually kind of after meeting Rave Train, who I'm sure people know, shout out to him. He really showed me techno. Yeah. He really brought me into the techno scene. And at that point I was like hooked. It was like the tempo match, the grunginess. It was aggressive, but the music is so detailed to me. And I just like, I got lost in it. It's like a black hole. Still
Awesome.
there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, that's definitely been one of the joys of electronic music, is getting to experience different genres, and then also sort of finding the one or different ones that just really resonate with me the most. Because I would say, yeah, like I started out, 20 years ago listening to like anthemic, like trance music from like Tiesto
Nice.
or Armin van Buuren or something. And I remember like blasting that like in my headphones, like for all of high school, and then discovering like Sasha and Digweed, which is like a much darker, like more like hypnotic sound, and being like, oh wait, what's this? So I kind of like relate, like everyone kind of enters on more accessible stuff. And then as they fall down the rabbit hole, it's like, oh, like I really like this more like kind of weird esoteric stuff. Cause it tickles my brain in a certain way. Which I guess I have to, in terms of being true to, what rave is, I guess like how have maybe like psychedelics or like Molly kind of like influenced your sound or your experience of rave, since the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, there's no denying that it's a huge part of going to shows. I mean, I've been going to shows since 2012, 2013. It definitely has influenced, I think, the way I hear music. I will say the first time I ever heard psytrance, I went to a psytrance festival, and that was the first time I ever took a tab. And hearing it on that level, like, brought it to a different realm. And hearing it in that way, I like hear music in a different detail.
Yeah.
I can like pick out different sounds, and like each time I do it too, depending on where I am, I'm like listening to something else. So I think it just makes your mind think in a different way, and you experience it in a different way, that maybe you see it in a new light. And then like I'll go look for a track that has like something that I heard in there that I didn't hear before. But it is a big part of the scene, and it definitely makes it fun. And I think it makes you more open to hearing new sounds, like going to a psytrance show.
Right.
That I had no idea.
Yeah. Like I feel like the way that I tend to look at it, it's kind of like the sum or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Right. So the music on its own, pretty good, like pretty accessible, although many would argue that like it doesn't make any sense. It's just like repetitive. Right. And then, like a psychedelic experience on its own, pretty awesome too. But somehow in the marriage of the two, there's kind of like this synergy that's completely different and gives a new lens to the way you process music going forward. And like to me, like that's always been, and I feel like not everyone experiences rave the same way, obviously, but I feel like for me, part of what makes kind of the art of DJing so special is being at a show and having the DJs do their thing and kind of feeling as though, okay, this person knows what I'm going through right now, like subjectively, and they are tailoring this musical experience with that in mind. And that always blew my mind. Like, oh, like these guys are so fucking dialed into like what I'm playing or what I'm feeling right now that they know exactly what to play.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that's definitely like, I think that's for me part of what makes kind of, the scene so compelling.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel that part because I mean, I've been in the crowd, like maybe on shrooms or something, and you're like, you hear some like weird vocals and you're like, what, are they messing with me? Like they're doing this on purpose. What's happening? And I definitely have tracks that I try to mess with people like that. Like I have one that says like, it just cuts the music and it's like, the cops are here, everybody get out. And like the look on people's faces is hilarious because I know how they feel. I'd be like, oh my God, do we have to leave? Like, so it's cool. It's like another relation to people because I'm sharing my energy up there. So I want to like, and I know what it's like to be in the crowd and to have that fun at a rave. So I want them to feel like I would want to feel in the crowd. So.
100%. Like there's a track that I actually was playing on my own yesterday, and like the vocal was like, "You've now been owned." But it just like, it repeats like very subtly in the background, like, you've now been owned. And I'm like, this is fucking weird, but I feel like it's gonna play well the next time I get a chance to play it on a dance floor.
Yeah, I like those tracks.
Yeah, my friends and I used to joke that you could just say anything as long as the beat's good and the audience will just go crazy. Where it's just like, I'm going to wash my clothes, or just something like completely inane. And people would be like, yeah, he's going to wash his fucking clothes.
Yeah, they're just excited.
Yeah. But that's like the enthusiasm of the rave scene, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, you're fairly new as a DJ, but your profile has clearly grown very quickly. I guess, can you talk to like some of the challenges or some of the biggest challenges you face in terms of like getting it off the road? Because we were kind of talking about how before we started recording that like fundamentally this is show business, and like, people have heard stories forever about how hard it is to be an actor, and you have to wait tables, and then you have to like grovel at auditions and stuff. And I feel like people don't really hear as much in terms of what it takes to be a DJ. And even though, in 2021, it's one of the, biggest kind of segments of entertainment. So yeah, would love to kind of hear like, some of your major obstacles in getting it off the road or off the ground.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm not the best with social media in general, like to keep up on posting, to know what to post. Like it has to be very tasteful. It has to keep people interested. And I mean, that's a huge part. I'm sure people have seen that Rave Train does is, I mean, he's a creative director. Like a lot of the things that we do helps me put together those ideas and film those things. But I think a lot of it is about building a brand. And trying to stick with the brand, but still make it interesting that people are like, they want to look at it. But a lot of the challenge has just been like developing that. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a DJ up there playing techno music, but how is it different than other people that you should come to my show and come watch me over someone else?
Right.
I think that's the hardest challenge. And also just like collecting content, I guess, like knowing what to post and what will be tasteful and what's not tasteful, and trying to interest people enough that like it's not too much, but people enjoy it, and then they're like, they want to come check it out.
Right. So in terms of kind of getting more gigs and kind of getting the ball rolling there, is the bigger driver like making connections and like networking? Or do you find that as you grow the social media, like that, the rest kind of falls into place? Like what has been your experience?
It's a little bit of both. I think picking, like I do get people that like message me and just ask to play shows, but a lot of it, we know a lot of people in the community. I think every show that I go to is successful because at least one person comes up to me and they're like, I've never heard you play before. This is awesome. Like, can I get your Instagram? So I think each of those are successful, and a lot of bookings and relationships have come out of that. Just like being at a show, walking around being like, hey, I play techno. Like, oh, I threw a warehouse party. Cool. Let's like do something,
Right.
I'm pretty outgoing in that way that like, it's cool to work with anyone, to meet anyone that has this like love of techno. Especially I've even done some like dubstep shows too. Like it's cool to see how many people in the community are like doing the same thing, interested in the same thing. And I think a lot of it comes from networking, but also the Instagram, like networking and then being able to show someone my socials helps a lot because they're like, oh, this is like, okay, you actually are kind of like legitimate,
Right.
if I didn't have like, I even have like an EPK and like things that I can send people out. So making it look, they kind of like go hand in hand, I think. And as they both get better, as I build my social, networking gets easier. And then I'm at more shows, and then networking, like I'm doing that more. So it's a
Got it. It
balance.
all kind of like feeds itself.
It does. Yeah.
That's really fascinating to me too, because I feel like, back in the day, like as a DJ, you would just record a mix to like a CD or something, or before that, even like a cassette tape, and that was it. That was all you had. And you can just kind of be like, hey, would you want to listen to my mix? And
gosh.
like, yeah, by and large, like, you know, at least my experience was like, yeah, thanks, and then gets tossed to the wayside. I think now with social media, it's almost like it's like your resume, right? Like you have, it's proof that you're doing what you say you're doing, and people can see your art and they can see kind of what your brand is. So it's like a much higher level of engagement with the people that you're coming into contact with, which is really awesome.
Yeah, I didn't even think it in that way, that you just recorded a mix. And
Yeah.
I mean, now I have like people messaging me and like, can you record a podcast? I did one for like London, or I recorded a mix for him and just sent it to him. Like the accessibility is so much easier, but also so many more people can be on there.
Yeah. So it's like, it's like a much more saturated market at the same time. Cause like the barriers of entry were probably like higher back in the day. Cause you would have to have like turntables, right? And then you would have to go get the records, and the records were like $10 for one track. Like, I can't even imagine going back to that. Like, you know, because now like the track collection just like grows like exponentially every week, but like having to like sort through at a record store. But yeah, so like, you know, like now like anyone can be a DJ, which is like awesome and difficult at the same time, right? Because now you're competing with so many more people, but also it's never been easier to like showcase your work and what you're about. It's just like an interesting like new set of challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why the branding, I think, is really important, at least for me too, because if there is so many people just playing music, making it like a whole brand, and like there's this whole idea around claws and being this like aggressive but still like good music that's playing, like it has a whole vibe to it that people want to be a part of, more than just like I want to go listen to this, is kind of the approach that I'm trying to take.
Yeah, and I guess I have so many questions for you, but the next is like, what kind of informs your aesthetic in terms of like hard acid techno? And I've listened to some of your stuff. It's pretty good. To me, it almost has like a very like, it feels like a rave did when I was like coming up, but new, right? It's like it's like a cleaner, like the sounds are much less analog because all the music is being made digitally, but the vibe is like, oh shit, this is almost like the hardcore room almost at like a rave that I used to go to back in the day. So how did you kind of, I mean, you mentioned that, you know, with Rave Train, you kind of experienced that, but as you kind of continue to like, I guess, define your aesthetic, how did that occur and how do you do it going forward?
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm going for. So I appreciate that you heard that in the music. I mean, what I call it is neo acid, which is new acid. So I don't know what it is, but the moment I heard that 90s acid sound that people played at the raves, I was like, that is what I want my music to sound like. But I want it to have the touch of like the progression that it's made to now. Like techno is very progressive, and that's why I like it a lot, because like listening to like, trying to think, Kraftwerk or something like that, or like Daft Punk even, like that was like so basic techno, and then to hear it as it progresses each year, it changes so much. So I like to have that 90s acid sound in it, almost with the hardcore, where it's like really banging and like it's very, very drivey. Because a lot of people, like people that raved in the 90s, that's where it came about.
Yeah.
So that familiarity is cool, but to add like faster acid with that 90s sound of the acid, but change the tempo of it and make it more aggressive and make it kind of bouncing around more. And that's kind of, I think, what makes it newer. And then also adding like remix stuff of like vocals that you recognize, or making it a little more melodic in the sense that you can kind of hear how the track's going. Like there's some vocals in it. We get to a drop, like having like more drops in it too, which kind of comes from me liking trance, and the like 90s trance kind of goes together. It's like a lot in combination, but ultimately I want it to be like a 90s rave, right? If it happened today, with like the tracks that happened today. And I want it to be drivey, and like you still have a beat. It's fast enough that you can hear the acid and you're like excited and your heart's pumping, but not too fast where you don't get like a breath and like you can't appreciate some of the more melodic like tracks I may play.
So do you see, so one thing that I've noticed is kind of BPM speeds have kind of moved back and forth over the years that I've been, raving. So things were really fast when I first got into it, like 130 and up. And then for like 15 years, I felt like they were dialing it back to where like stuff that I was buying and then listening to, DJs that I follow play, like we were like in the 120 zone for like a while. And then now into the 2020s, I've begun to notice like, holy shit, like a lot of these tracks are like 140, like I've seen like 160. So the BPMs have gone up. So like, do you think that's just like a generational preference thing, or has there been kind of like, we've all decided we're done with 120 and the committee has spoken and we're moving up to 136 and up? Or I mean, is that something that you think about like when you're playing, like, oh, I'm gonna bang at like 140, like that's just
well, I mean, honestly, I don't know why this tempo, but 142 is my favorite.
Wow,
that is my right in there. But it depends on the show, depends on where I'm playing. But I like to play between 140 and 145.
Wow. Like, I mean, when I listened to your stuff online, I was like, this is fast.
It's like, but it like, I feel like if I went any like up to 150 and stuff, I would cross that threshold of being like too much. And to me, the acid like drones out a little bit. Like, I don't know why that speed is just like the sweet spot for me. But it also depends on the crowd mood and like what's going on. But I do see this push to just faster and faster. I think it may be a lot of European influence. I mean, in general, I've said it before, like techno, it originally came from Detroit, right, as we know. But Berlin really took it and ran with it.
Right.
And a lot of artists that I look up to and like get their tracks from and listen to their stuff are in France on like Raw, Possession, and then Berlin artists. I mean, like there's just so many to name, but I think I've been looking at a lot of like Raw people and their stuff bangs. Like there's some artists, who is it? TRYM. And he almost plays like it's hard style hard trance techno. And I think things like that are coming into the genre that they're like almost, it's kind of like cyclical. Like now like hardstyle is getting cool again and hardcore and like trance is coming back and it's just, and that's part of the progressiveness of techno, that it like people are starting to feed these new things into it and now it's becoming faster because something like hardstyle is kind of like a crossover.
Yeah.
So I do see this rise in BPM, but yet, I mean, OGs like Richie Houghton played at like 125. Like that was normal. Right. So I think maybe people's like energy to just want more and more.
Right.
And it's kind of what's in style right now, but I feel like it probably will. I mean, everything's cyclical and it'll come back.
I think, it like ebbs and it flows. I mean, it's like, BPMs are fluid. It's like gender, people just flow. Right now I still identify as a 129 DJ. But that may change. Yeah. I'm not necessarily binary as it relates to BPM. So
I know I will listen to everything, but I think it's also different, like what you play as opposed to like what you listen to. Cause I mean, I listen to a lot of different genres, like psytrance and trance are one of my favorites, but I don't necessarily play psytrance. So I still respect the slower BPMs.
Right. And like genres are just constantly getting redefined all the time. Like, right now, like tech house is considered like a dirty word. Like if you call something tech house, like techno purists are like, oh, what is that bullshit? But then, like 10 years ago, tech house was cool. It's just that it's gotten redefined, right? So tech house was definitely something else 10 years ago. But now when people talk about tech house, they're talking about like Fisher losing it, which I don't have anything against personally, like shout out to Fisher. But I think what people don't like is that it's sort of been, the sound has been adopted by like a subset of EDM enthusiasts, you know, who are like very bro-y, like frat guys, and they're like, yeah, I fucking want to lose it, bro. And now like tech house is like a dirty word. But trance was like that, you know, trance was awesome in the early 2000s. And then by like 03, like anyone who was associated with trance was like, oh no, I'm not a trance DJ anymore. Like, you know, trance not cool. So like the labels change, the sounds change, and that's just kind of the nature of it. I think one of the challenges for me is like not being like an old man about it and like, oh, what is this? Like, what are they playing? Because I definitely feel that way on like a lot of the commercial stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like again, like no hate against like Zed or Afrojack or something, but personally, like for me, like I cannot stand it. And for a long time, I was just like, you know, like the old man in his front yard. But I feel like it's gotten better. It's gotten more interesting. Like, you know, like the younger generation have had EDM for a long enough time now that they're like, oh, like we're ready for some more like interesting new stuff. And I think like your rising popularity is like a testament to that, you know, where people who maybe 5 years ago, you know, only would have gone to see Fisher or something that personally I am not a fan of, you know, they're now like embracing more interesting music.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with just like the rave scene in America, like whatever is on. I mean, the biggest thing that runs anything is Insomniac. So whatever they put on the main stage is going to be popular, you know? So I think it also just comes from like influence and what people are shown, like drum and bass. Where is their drum and bass massive in America? Like London, that's all they listen to.
Right.
But people don't get the chance to experience it because there's really not a lot of, I've never seen drum and bass on a main stage before.
Do we not still have Bass Rush?
I think we do. Do they play drum bass?
I thought, or maybe now it's more like bass.
I think it's very I mean, there's definitely some drum and bass here, but it's not to the level of degree of somewhere in London where they have those giant massives like as big as EDC, literally all drum and bass. But I think it's like the influence of what's popular right now and like what they do put on some of the main stages. And I think that influences what people like choose to listen to and like what they think is like the popular rave music and stuff, you know? But I definitely, and too, like I don't see techno, like there's some techno DJs and stuff. IO was definitely breaking through. He was definitely one of the people that I think if you didn't really know techno and it wasn't something you were aware of, people that had heard him were like, and if you mentioned techno, they were like, oh, IO, like he's doing it. So I did look up to him a lot because he had that breakout moment of fans that weren't diehard techno fans like me that are already obsessed with it. He got that whole other crowd for people to see him and he got to main stage. Like, I mean, he was huge at EDC. So I think that's really inspirational in the scene, but it's definitely changed a lot in the last couple of years. Yeah, I would agree.
Got it. And actually, I'm embarrassed to admit I haven't heard of IO, but now I feel like I need to look him up. And generally, I feel like I'm pretty on top of this shit. So
yeah, I mean, he's talented. He was playing like it was like techno trance. He was on like Dead Mouse's label.
Okay.
So he just had such a new sound, different than anybody, which is what I'm trying to do. You know, not a lot of people. I think acid is coming up. That baseline sound, it's coming back. I mean, when the Rowland 303 came out and everything, it was crazy. But bringing that back now, I'm starting to see more people start to play it and more people start to be influenced by it, which is cool. And I hope that like as I continue on, that I could be an influence in that and like make it more popular, especially the way I play it. I mean, like I would say 70% of my tracks during my set are just acid, which is the point, but I love it.
Right, with those like synths, right? The 808 synth,
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited that it's getting better and I hope that my sound is different enough that it like turns people's heads from everywhere and they're like, what is that? Even if you don't know techno, you're like, well, that's cool. I want to be into that. Yeah.
So I guess just to like switch gears a little, you know, like myself, you know, you also have kind of a a real job and career that, you know, pays the bills while you pursue creative endeavors. What have been some of kind of the bigger challenges in terms of managing that? And, you know, is it something that you have to keep a secret at, you know, on the job, or do people kind of know that, you know, you have this side thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm actually an accountant, a tax accountant, which is super interesting. Accountant by day and techno DJ by night.
Awesome.
But I used to work at a public firm, and I was very low key about the rave, being in a rave, because everybody is like, oh, you rave, okay. And they didn't really get it. But I work at a cannabis company now, so they're pretty chill. And they actually do know that I DJ. I've sent them videos, like a couple of them I invited to shows. So they're actually pretty supportive of it, which is cool. That's why I like this company. I can be more myself. And it has pros and cons to it. Like, I mean, it makes DJing easier because it's not such I have to make this income, or I have to make this show, or I'm not going to eat. It's nice that I have this job, that it gives me the flexibility and the like freedom to do this more as a hobby until it gets bigger and bigger.
Right.
But working 9 to 6 every day during the week definitely makes it tough. I can't sit there and make a track for 10 hours.
Yeah. In terms of scheduling. So, I mean, do you ever play gigs on weeknights, and then you'll go to work the next day?
It depends. I do work from home too, since all of this has gone down. So it's been a lot more chill. But it's a balance, you know, especially like a lot of gigs too, I've done more, that's more like work. Like I played one on a Thursday night, and I played at like 1 a.m. And then I was like, all right, I got to go home and go to bed. I have work tomorrow, you know? So actually like finding a balance between, forgot sometimes we did a lot of bookings, and I forgot sometimes that I should just like go enjoy a show, which was interesting. But I kind of treat it like work sometimes, where if I have work the next day, like I got to go do the show, enjoy it, have fun, and then got to go do my day job and make money that way.
No, I agree. I mean, even for this, like, you know, I've been going to a lot more events just to network and meet people, which is something that before COVID, I used to do a lot in my regular job. So I was like, okay, I'll just kind of approach it the same way. Mm-hmm. You know, but it's like, on the one hand, it's sort of like helping your project, but on the other, it does take out some of the fun of it, because now you're like, I am working. So I guess that's kind of like the double-edged sword, though, like when you kind of try to pursue your passion, you know, because at some level, even though maybe the economic pressure is taken away, it's still like, okay, like I'm doing this for a purpose. I need to like get in and out. So I certainly relate.
Yeah.
But you're saying they know, and they're pretty supportive.
Yeah. I actually have a picture that was taken at one of the shows that I'm smoking a joint and I'm DJing. It's like in my hand, and I sent that as my like intro picture, and they loved it. They were like, everybody was like, I think it was like the whole company group message, the like Slack thing, and everybody was like, nice, Anna, that's awesome.
High fives all around.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's amazing.
That was a little weird to send that out. That's definitely, I feel like, abnormal. But it makes it easier. I mean, it's a company I can be myself. So.
Yeah, I remember like during the pandemic, I had a friend who, his company was like, oh, we're all going to do like a talent show over Zoom. And, you know, he didn't really talk about being a DJ, but he is. And they're like, oh, wait, you do that, right? Like, why don't you get on the Zoom and play for us for 10 minutes? And he's like, I don't know that you guys are going to be into like the stuff that I'm going to like slam here. But he did it. He did like a 10-minute like neutered down like on the Zoom. He was like, it was fun, but maybe one of like my most shameful experiences as a DJ. Like,
oh, no.
like doing it on Zoom for the company talent show.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have that in me.
Yeah, I think that'd be a little much I am hesitant to like have them at a show, because I'm like, it's kind of a different persona that I am, you know, especially like what I'm wearing. Like I'm not wearing like, I don't have to wear business clothes at a cannabis company, but it's definitely not fishnets and
right. I've seen like your DJ look. It's definitely like goth, like, which is true. Yeah, if you were still working at a public company, like what would they respond?
I definitely got some looks at the public firm though. I wasn't like, my page wasn't what it is now. I had just started, so it definitely wasn't anything they had seen yet. But I feel like if they saw it, they would have maybe had a little bit of judgment and just didn't get it. But I mean, I don't think I would have got fired over it. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still working hard to like keep the Chinese wall up. That's why y'all don't know my last name. And I just go by Decoy on the gram. Eventually it'll crumble, but I feel like by the time that it does, hopefully this will be big enough that it won't matter. Because if it's like somebody that I work with, like their kid, like sees me on YouTube and they're like, wait a minute, I know that guy. Then I feel like that's probably a win-win. But for now, it's just like rolling the dice.
Yes.
But yeah, and we were talking before this that, you know, I think one of the things that popped out to me in doing this is that so many people who participate in this scene, you know, they have like regular lives outside of it. And, you know, they do this because they're passionate about it, which I love. And, you know, I don't know, like there's something to be said for having a lot of skin in the game, right? Like, so to go back to comedians, you know, a lot of comedians, they're in it, like that's their world, you know, and they'll do like money gigs to like keep themselves afloat, but they are fully immersed. And same if you're an actor, right? Like you're not really pursuing a career outside of auditions all the time. And I think one of the cool things about rave is that it does kind of allow people to do both. It doesn't demand that like, okay, well, you have to go to audition, so there's no way that you can hold down a regular job. And even, I don't know if you know Theo, like rave legend, he was on here a few weeks ago, and, you know, he has like a very like regular, like button down career. And I was like, really? That's what you do? And he's like, yeah, I've never like, he's like, I've always done it. But you know, he's gigging constantly. So it's awesome. And then, you know, if you're like the rare kind of lucky few who becomes like a clubbing headliner, then it pays the bills.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do it for the love of the beats.
We do though. I mean, if one day I could quit my day job and do this full time, that'd be amazing. But that's hard.
Yeah.
You know, that it definitely, like, I feel like almost every DJ and person I met in this industry does something else.
Yeah.
You're right. And I think originally too, like raving, it started as like an escape from the day job.
Yeah.
You know? And as the community has grown, people have found if they get the chance to like really make this a career and make this full time, that's amazing. But it definitely, I mean, I love like going to shows and when people like, you're like you meet somebody new at a rave, of course, and you're like, oh, I do this, I'm from there. And I love the reaction on people's faces when they're like, oh, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to count it. And they're like, okay. Like they just have nothing else. They're like, all right, cool. And it just, but you're running around in this like cool, different world where you can like be whatever you want. So I feel like it kind of makes sense that you do have something outside of it, but like everybody comes together to this one thing to kind of do that together. And then we go back, take a little break, and then come back to it.
Yeah, like all walks of life, that, you know, and like the kind of variety of jobs of people that I know who are in the scene, like spans, like accountants, nurses. There's some DJ that I follow that I don't know personally, but I follow on Instagram, and then she posted something like yesterday that she's like an occupational therapist, and I was like, whoa. That is not the vibe I get at all, like from your Instagram.
I love that.
Yeah, where it's like she's very like occult, like occult DJ, and I was like, okay. So I mean, but to me, that's also been one of the like amazing things about doing this podcast is getting to like, you know, because you meet people out in the scene, but you know, like I think, especially when there's a party going on, you have less of an opportunity to like actually like sit down with people, like unless you're like together in the smoking area, like sharing a cigarette or something, right? There's like a lot of connection happening, but a lot of times it's hard to kind of really get to know people because it's just like sensory overload. And in doing this and in networking for this, it's been real like amazing to kind of feel like learn the people, these are the people behind the scene, which
Yeah.
is what I want the show to be. So again, I mean, we're not wrapping up just yet, but just, yeah, again, thank you for being here and, you know, sharing your story with us.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This is, I like what you're doing too, because I think the past year I've felt that I've gotten closer to the community. And instead of like that moment when you're at a show and you're like, I have my earplugs in, I can't hear what people are saying.
Yeah.
You're like screaming your name at someone, is like, you get to know people. But over the past year, people have come together in a different way, I think, now that like the big things weren't going on. And it was almost just like friends hanging out. And it was cool because I got to know more of the people like on the work side of the music industry, like actually throwing the events, more of the DJs, people making the music, lighting people. Like I've seen it in a different light as opposed to just going to shows as just as a raver and like running around. So I like to see this other side because I'm like, wow, everybody is like, people have so many things going on. There's so much more detail, like to really like meet someone who's like running the warehouse. It's cool to know them and then see kind of how everything came about rather than just like running in. I'm like, oh, I see the detail they did in these lights, the way they set up the stage. It makes it more personal.
Yeah. I mean, that's so awesome. And that's totally, you know, what I'm trying to bring. Cause like you, even though I've been doing it like longer, like I've always been just a consumer. And it was always kind of like arm's length, like, okay, like I've got this job, I got this thing, I need to be serious. This is something that I'll do, you know, periodically, even though it's like the thing like that I love most. So yeah, I think to your point, COVID definitely like melted a lot of barriers, generally, and also for me personally in terms of like, you know, like finding new ways to connect and contribute in the scene.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to kind of touch back on too is, you know, you mentioned, it's 24-hour festival in Berlin, which sounded amazing. And, you know, it sounds like you and Rave Train definitely kind of go to a lot of events here. So like, what are some of the ones either in Southern California, LA, or otherwise that have stuck out to you as highlights, or even to where they've influenced how you as an artist?
I think probably the biggest things here, warehouses are definitely my favorite. That's where I find a lot of the driving techno is. 6 a.m. and Incognito are, I would say, the most popular. I mean, that's where we're always going for after parties and shows. So I've gotten a lot of influence there, and I've met a lot of cool people too that have like broadened my network. I feel like that's where I meet the most. The techno is like a cult, I swear. Like once you're like in it, people, and you meet someone in it, you're like, oh, okay. And you just have a million things to talk about. So I think those are places I've really gotten a chance to be influenced. And then for massives, I mean, we usually go to stuff at NOS Center. Like we're kind of at everything. I know we're going to Nocturnal the next couple of weeks. That was cool. There wasn't too much techno. But there's so many artists there too that it's nice to like run around, and I like those shows because there's so many different things going on that's when I find like new artists. Cause you just get the chance to be there all day. And like, I would maybe walk into someone's set that I wouldn't think to go to if it was just a regular show. Trying to think of other shows. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of festivals around here.
Yeah. I mean, were there particular ones though that like stuck out to you outside of the Berlin one? Like, holy shit, that was like a formative experience for me.
I don't know if any were in Berlin. It was so
that was just like
amazing.
The apex. That was the apex.
Yeah. I would say CrossFest is actually, I really like CrossFest. It's so chill. San Diego has such a vibe. And they do bring good techno. I mean, last year, it was the last thing we went to before everything went down, but it was Charlotte and Carl Cox. And I mean, I like died and got to heaven.
B2B or?
No, okay. Well, Carl came on right after Charlotte. Okay. But I mean, I stood there in the middle for the full hour of Charlotte. I think it was an hour, 2 hours. I couldn't tell you because I was just so like obsessed with it. But I saw her, saw Carl. And I know this year they're actually bringing a guy, probably going to butcher it, but it's Cabossel.
I don't know.
He's super popular in Europe. He plays like Dax J. He plays like harder, kind of more my tempo stuff, a little less acid, but I mean, he's really talented. So I'm excited that they're bringing him, and I think Anna's going to.
Oh, I like Anna.
Yeah, she's really talented. Which, by the way, I was gonna, my name actually is Anna, but I couldn't use that. So Claus. Claus has a little different
you
meaning.
can remember that better. I feel like Claus definitely more memorable.
Yeah, it definitely worked. But yeah, I mean, Crossfest, I'm excited to go this year.
Okay.
Like they actually have really, really tasteful, exciting techno artists that I'm like ready to see.
Yeah, I mean, because I was talking to you guys before, and it really does seem like you experience the gamut of the scene, whereas, I mean, even myself included, like most people kind of find their niche and they kind of hang out within that. So like, I think for me, like I go to a lot of undergrounds that are kind of influenced by that old school kind of like Sasha and Digweed, like progressive underground sound. So events like Subtract, like, you know, Anton Tumasi throws a thing on Sundays, or like Clinic Wednesday or Temple Tuesday. But like, yeah, you guys, like you're doing like the NOS stuff and the underground stuff and like the like warehouse rave. It's kind of the full gamut. I guess, would you like not have it any other way, or is there a particular segment that resonates with you the most? I mean, you said warehouse, right? So
the underground definitely resonates with me more. And I think that's solely for the fact that techno is just not played necessarily at NOS too much. Most of those artists usually play at 6 a.m. in the warehouse industry like that. But I think I like both. It's mostly because I do like most of the, like all electronic music, and I like the artist specifically. Like if Armin is playing at the Palladium, I'm going to go to the Palladium and see Armin. Like if Deadmau5 is playing there, I'm down to go. Like I think it really, if it's a good artist, I appreciate, if you're a talented artist, like I'm down to go listen. As long as the music's good, I'm like happy where I am, you know? But I think ultimately, if you buried me in a warehouse, I'd be fine.
Then I guess taking it away from festivals or events generally, have there been any particular DJ performances that stood out to you? I mean, you've mentioned a few already, but that were like these were fundamental to like who I am as a DJ today.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That Charlotte's Had It Crossed. I think, and we saw her too in Berlin. I think that 24-hour show that we did was definitely influential. Just to hear the detail and the talent. I also saw, I think it was 9 times 9. Seeing them at, I think it was a 6 a.m. party. It was like right before. And to watch them, they played modular. That is some of the stuff that I'm like, that's how I want to play. Like, I just get this feeling when I'm in the crowd that I like want to be up there so badly playing that. And I'm like so intrigued to the detail that they're putting into it.
Right.
Definitely those sets have, and Carl Cox at Grant Park too, actually.
Okay.
That was just
He dropped
amazing.
the oh yes on you?
Absolutely. Always. Ugh. Yeah.
I feel like at this point, that's the only reason why I go to see Carl Cox. Like, just you're gonna drop the oh yes.
Yes.
I think I've only seen him play once live, but it was at Burning Man, which was cool.
Okay.
But yeah, the whole like, okay, we just need to hear the oh yes. And then once it dropped, it's like, okay, like we can leave now. I mean, I'm cool to stay, but if you guys want to leave, like he dropped the oh yes. So like we're
had
good.
the moment, yeah.
We had the moment.
Yeah. I went from not seeing him ever to seeing him at Grant Park, and then seeing him the next weekend at Crossed. So
this was like pretty recently, right? Like
that was right before 19, before all the stuff went down.
I remember.
That was it.
And I think he even maybe had like two days at Grand Park.
Yeah.
Like it was a double.
Yeah. There was two, Dax J.
Oh, okay.
We were in Vienna, one of the places we stopped in Austria, and we were just like looking at RA. I mean, we don't know what the club's there, and it ended up being a really cool club, but it was called Gorelle Ferrelle. And like the Acid Techno Club, it was like started out of that, club. And I didn't even like know who he was at the time. But Rave Train did, and he was like, we're going to this. And I remember being there, and that was the coolest set, one of the coolest sets I've ever seen. I only have one video from it, and it's just like, hearing him play, I was like, that level that he was playing at and like how hyped everyone was just the track selection too. He's a very good DJ.
Yeah. I mean, like I feel like DJs get a lot of flack because they're like, oh, well, you're playing other people's music. So like, how hard could it be? And like, okay, like on one hand, I get like fundamentally, yes. But if you've ever been to like an event and like, I mean, those sound systems, like managing that sound system and kind of like curating a $10,000 sound system for, 1,000 people and being dialed into what state of mind they're in and kind of, like, it's almost like not to get like too egotistical about it. And I'm sure, you're a DJ, so you're probably on board with me, right? But it's like, you're a shaman, like, like kind of like ushering this experience, and which for a lot of people is spiritual. I know that's one of the things that brings me back to it, where it's like, we live kind of in this capitalist society and, everything's sort of defined for us. And even spirituality is only okay if you do it within this like very small band of, Jesus and organized religion, and everything outside of that is sort of like, no. So yeah, to have like an outlet where you can actually like, be one with other people and enjoy the music. And so, yeah, like I feel like, the DJ is kind of a shaman.
It's it's very powerful to like stand up there and feel like you have that power, because you are controlling the energy in the room. Like if you play a terrible track, people are going to walk away, or people are going to not be happy.
Right.
You play an amazing track, people are going to love it. And so you have that power, but you have that power. So like, don't abuse it. Don't like, I think just be specific in the way that you're doing it. But it's cool. Like just appreciate it, because you are like, it's exciting. And my favorite is when I put together a really good set. Like I try to do my sets in the way that it like flows, that I'm not like just banging a track out all of a sudden.
There's progression. There's like a journey. Yeah.
It is like a journey. Exactly. It's like a complete journey from start to finish. And it's so humbling for people to come up after the show and be like, I just had the time of my life. Like I was so happy. I danced like the whole time. Like that just brings me joy that I'm sharing. I feel so much myself up there, sharing the tracks that I love, like the music that I love, and like a piece of me. So to have someone come reciprocate that and be like, I really, really enjoyed that. That is like, that's like the goal. I feel like.
I feel like there's nothing more satisfying than, people coming up to you and being like, oh, like that was a meaningful experience for me.
Yeah.
Ultra meaningful to have someone come up to you like that. I think the trick though, and it's not something that I've had to deal with personally, but that, I've heard once you become big, it's sort of like keeping your ego in check around that. There's this really good RA, like short documentary with Nina Kravitz, and they follow her around, and she has like so many good insights, and she's just kind of narrating it. And one of the things she says is like, yeah, like every night, people are basically like worshiping you every night. And she's like, one of the major challenges is to like recognize that. I mean, she calls it an illusion, which means it's completely fake. I don't know that I would agree with that assessment, but I think like the main idea of it is just like, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm still just a person. But yes, it is true that like, you're kind of overseeing the dance floor, and you do get kind of a lot of like worship, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
One other thing she mentioned from that video, which I never thought about until she mentioned it, is that, when you're a touring DJ, it's just like you like traveling around by yourself, like a lot. And even though, I know for me as a non-DJ DJ, like the idea or like the fantasy of like, superstar flying around sounds amazing. But yeah, like the flip side is like, you are like alone a lot. And like all of like, she's like, all of these amazing things that I've seen in my travels, like for DJing, like I've had to kind of just acknowledge that it's just for me. Like these are like just experiences for Nina. And she said that there's kind of there's a cruel aspect to life. of like, oh, look at like this amazing stuff that life has provided for me, but only I get to experience. Which is only to say that, like, I think no matter where you are in life and no matter what you're doing, there's always kind of pluses and minuses, right? But with that said, I wish you nothing but the greatest of success, and that, you know, for you to have experiences just for you, beautiful experiences just for you, and no one else as a touring DJ in the future. But again, just, you know, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you as well.
And sharing your story. You know, hopefully we have fulfilled our goal here, in, you know, sharing insights to the audience about like who the actual people are behind the scenes here. So thank you.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Sweet. Well, hopefully we'll have you back again, or maybe you and Rave Train, or however we want to do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, folks. Well, that's it. We'll see you next week. And remember to like and subscribe.
Thanks, guys.
Fantastic.
Bring it back now.